The tides of redemption. The setup. Poseidon stood at the edge of a ruined coastal city, his feet sinking into the sand. The once thriving town, known as Amphitrite's Haven, was now a shadow of its former self, its harbor destroyed by the fury of his storms, its people scattered like driftwood. The weight of his judgment by the scales of Themis lingered in his heart as he gazed upon the devastation he had caused. No longer the untouchable god of the seas, Poseidon vowed to restore what he had broken, not with divine fury, but with deliberate care. Redemption would not be a matter of grand gestures, but of humble, tangible acts. The first step, listening. Poseidon walked among the remnants of the city, his trident set aside as a sign of peace. The mortals, wary of his presence, kept their distance at first. Some shouted curses, while others simply stared in silence. But Poseidon did not react with anger. He stopped to listen, bowing his head as they recounted their losses, the homes swallowed by the sea, the lives swept away, the dreams drowned in his wrath. "I cannot undo the past," Poseidon said, his voice carrying the deep resonance of the ocean. "But I can help rebuild what was lost if you allow me." Rebuilding the harbor, Poseidon began with the harbor, the lifeblood of the city's economy. Using his power over the seas, he called forth stone from the ocean floor, forming a sturdy foundation for the new docks. He worked alongside the mortals, not as a god commanding their efforts, but as an equal, learning from their expertise in crafting and construction. Slowly, the harbor took shape. Fishing boats returned, bringing life back to the once deserted waters. Poseidon even calmed the seas around the city, ensuring safe passage for sailors and traders. The mortals, seeing his dedication, began to soften. Children who once feared him now watched with curiosity, and elders who had cursed his name began to offer quiet thanks, restoring the land. Next, Poseidon turned his attention to the farmlands that had been flooded by his storms. He worked with mortals skilled in agriculture to drain the salt water and restore the soil's fertility. As the land began to yield crops once more, the city's people found hope in the resilience of their community and in Poseidon's efforts. In a gesture of humility, Poseidon blessed the land, not to assert his power, but to ensure its prosperity for generations to come. The mortals, now seeing him in a new light, began to offer gifts, not as worship, but as tokens of gratitude. A test of resolve. Poseidon's journey was not without challenges. A group of mortals, still harboring bitterness, sought to sabotage his efforts. They plotted to collapse the newly built harbor, believing that Poseidon's redemption was a farce. When their plan was uncovered, Poseidon confronted them, not with anger, but with understanding. "I will not force you to forgive me," he said, "but know this: redemption is not about erasing the past. It is about building a better future together. If you destroy what we've built, you destroy that future for all of us." Moved by his words, the saboteurs abandoned their plan and began to work alongside the others, their resentment slowly replaced by respect. The dawn of a new relationship. As Amphitrite's haven flourished once more, Poseidon's relationship with mortals transformed. He was no longer just a god of power and wrath. He became a steward of the seas, a protector of those who lived by the water. The people of the city rebuilt a temple in his honor, not as a demand for worship, but as a symbol of reconciliation and hope. Poseidon, standing on the shores at dawn, felt the weight of his guilt begin to lift. Redemption, he realized, was not a destination, but a journey, one he would continue for the rest of his days. The Shadows and the Flame. Introduction: The Mortal Warrior. The Garden of Redemption stood as a vivid testament to resilience, a sanctuary of vibrant life carved from the ruins of despair. Its flourishing beauty was more than an oasis. It embodied defiance against oppression, echoing the voices of those who dared to challenge the gods themselves. Travelers from across the lands came to marvel at its splendor, but for many, it was more than a sight. It was a source of hope. Among these pilgrims was Alaric, a mortal warrior forged in the crucible of endless battle. His armor, battered and scarred, told stories of countless campaigns against tyrants and beasts. Each dent was a history written in steel, every scratch a chapter etched in blood. Yet, despite the wear and tear, Alaric's resolve burned brighter than ever, a flame unyielding, even in the coldest shadows. His reputation as a fierce but honorable soldier had spread like wildfire, and now he stood before Medusa, the woman whose defiance had become legend. Kneeling before her, Alaric's voice was steady, yet heavy with the burden of his people. "My kingdom is dying under the weight of tyranny," he said, the raw sincerity in his words cutting through the silence. "I have seen the power of rebellion, but what I lack is wisdom. Your vision has united the forgotten. Teach me how to lead those who have lost hope." Medusa's gaze, both piercing and compassionate, lingered on the warrior. She saw in him not just the scars of battle, but the spark of potential, the capacity to ignite change. Yet Medusa was no stranger to the perilous path of rebellion. She had faced the gods themselves, had seen the fine line between justice and chaos, and understood that to fight without purpose could lead only to ruin. "Strength alone will not free your people," Medusa began, her voice resonant with the weight of her own experience. "Rebellion born of vengeance will merely perpetuate the cycle of suffering. You must rise not as a destroyer, but as a builder, a leader who inspires, unites, and protects." Her words carried both the wisdom of her battles and the pain of their consequences. Together, they devised a plan, a rebellion that would not burn the oppressor's world to ashes, but would instead light the way to a brighter future. They envisioned a movement rooted in justice, where liberation was achieved through strategy, unity, and restraint. Alaric's sword would remain sharp, but it would be wielded with purpose. And Medusa, though no longer bound to lead armies, would guide him, imparting the lessons forged in her own fight against divine oppression. Through their alliance, the Garden of Redemption became more than a sanctuary for the downtrodden. It evolved into the heart of a revolution. Warriors, scholars, and dreamers alike gathered, drawn to the cause by the promise of a new dawn. For Alaric, this was more than a rebellion. It was a chance to redefine leadership, not as a force of destruction, but as a beacon of hope. The forgotten god awakens whispers swept through the sanctuary like the first tremors before an earthquake, unseen, yet impossible to ignore. Rumors of a forgotten god, Netheros, stirring from centuries of dormancy, began to haunt the minds of all who sought refuge within the Garden of Redemption. It was said that Netheros was no ordinary deity, but one with a chaotic essence capable of sowing discord in the hearts of mortals and gods alike. Tales of their past reverberated through history, woven into the very fabric of mortal fears. Some claimed that Olympus, fearful of their power, had cast Netheros into slumber as punishment for daring to challenge divine order. Others whispered of darker truths, that Netheros had embraced their role as an agent of ruin and now awakened with vengeance burning in their heart. The air in the garden grew heavy with unease, as though the very soil sensed the looming threat. Medusa, ever attuned to the emotions of those who walked its paths, felt the ripple of dread spreading among her followers. This sanctuary, once a beacon of hope, now found itself overshadowed by the specter of an ancient peril. Yet Medusa refused to be governed by fear. She had faced gods and mortals alike, enduring betrayal, exile, and even death itself. She knew that survival required more than courage. It demanded strategy, foresight, and unity. Gathering her closest allies, she began forming an intricate web of alliances. Mortals, driven by their unyielding resilience, pledged their loyalty. Demigods, torn between their divine blood and human spirit, stood cautiously by her side. Even gods, begrudging in their cooperation, found themselves drawn into Medusa's plans, not out of trust, but necessity. As Medusa gathered her forces, the tensions between them began to surface. Old grievances sparked quarrels among mortals and demigods. Rivalries among the gods threatened to derail negotiations. It seemed the very chaos Netheros embodied was already unraveling the delicate threads binding the coalition together. Yet Medusa remained resolute. She moved through the discord with the precision of a weaver, repairing fragile connections and forging bonds where there had been none before. Her greatest fear was not the awakening of Netheros itself, but the possibility that their emergence would fracture the fragile balance she had worked so tirelessly to preserve. The Garden of Redemption, her sanctuary of hope and defiance, could become the battleground upon which harmony was destroyed. Nytheros was more than a foe. They were a test of everything Medusa believed in. Though she knew the road ahead was fraught with peril, Medusa prepared herself and her allies for the inevitable confrontation. She sought out ancient texts, delved into the myths that shrouded Nytheros in mystery, and uncovered truths hidden even from the gods. For Medusa, this was not merely a fight to protect the sanctuary, it was a battle for the soul of rebellion, a moment that would define whether strength and unity could prevail against chaos. Resistance in the shadows. Not everyone wished to see the garden thrive. For every soul drawn to its beauty and promise, there were others who saw it as a threat, a symbol of defiance that undermined their hold on power. In the shadows, forces loyal to the old ways conspired against Medusa's growing influence. Among these antagonists were political leaders whose authority was crumbling beneath the rebellion inspired by Alaric, as well as gods who resented being challenged by mortals and held accountable for their role in perpetuating tyranny. Their sabotage began subtly, insidious as a snake coiled beneath the grass. Rumors, dark, twisting falsehoods, spread through the garden, seeking to fracture the fragile bonds among Medusa's followers. Supplies destined for the sanctuary vanished into the night, intercepted by unseen hands. In the dead of darkness, whispers of betrayal grew louder, and a creeping unease settled over the once vibrant sanctuary. Even within the garden, agents of these conspirators dared to infiltrate, sowing discord from within. Yet Medusa, ever watchful and wary, began to unravel the threads of their schemes. Her years of struggle had taught her to see through deception, to find the truth buried beneath layers of lies. She worked quietly at first, identifying the saboteurs without tipping her hand. Alaric, loyal and resolute, became her right hand in this delicate game of shadows, using his battlefield instincts to track movements, decipher patterns, and rally allies willing to protect the sanctuary from within. The conspirators, sensing their plans faltering, grew bolder. The culmination of their efforts came in a daring attempt to steal the scales of Themis, a sacred artifact that had become a symbol of justice for Medusa's movement. They believed that destroying the scales would fracture the rebellion's resolve, stripping Medusa of the moral authority that united her diverse coalition of mortals, demigods, and even reluctant gods. Under cover of night, the infiltrators struck, their movements swift and precise as they slipped into the heart of the garden. But Medusa, anticipating their desperation, had laid her own trap. With Alaric and a small band of loyal allies at her side, she confronted the intruders in a dramatic standoff. The confrontation was as much a battle of wills as it was of strength. The infiltrators, though skilled and determined, underestimated the resolve of those who defended the garden. Blades clashed under the moonlight, the sanctuary's tranquility shattered by the sound of steel on steel. Alaric led the charge, his sword cutting through the ranks of the attackers with precision and purpose. Meanwhile, Medusa herself wielded her serpentine power, her gaze alone enough to paralyze some of the infiltrators with fear. Her allies fought with unyielding determination, their loyalty to the cause burning brighter than any blade. In the end, the conspirators were defeated, their plot thwarted, and the scales of Themis preserved. Medusa's coalition emerged stronger for the ordeal, their unity forged in the crucible of conflict. The garden, though scarred by the attack, stood as a testament to their resilience, a beacon of hope that refused to be extinguished, even by the darkest of plots. This victory was more than a battle won. It was a reminder that courage, vigilance, and unity could overcome even the most insidious threats. Yet Medusa knew that the shadows still lingered on the edges of her sanctuary. The forces of the old ways would not rest, and the fight for freedom and justice was far from over. Whispers of chaos. The rebellion in Alaric's kingdom was no longer a flicker. It had become a roaring flame, one that burned away the chains of oppression and illuminated the hearts of the downtrodden. Across the lands, whispers of his leadership spread, reaching even the distant corners untouched by tyranny's grasp. Medusa's sanctuary became more than a haven. It evolved into the nerve center of this uprising, a place where strategies were born and hope was cultivated. Scholars, warriors, and visionaries gathered under its banner, each bringing their unique strengths to the fight for liberation. Yet the winds carried more than stories of rebellion. Whispers of Nitharos's awakening grew louder, rippling through the sanctuary like a storm threatening to break. Mortals and gods alike shuddered at the thought of this forgotten deity returning, their chaotic essence capable of unraveling even the most carefully woven plans. Some allies hesitated, fearful that their fragile coalition might crumble under the weight of such a force. Others, more reckless, saw opportunity in the chaos, a chance to reshape the world in their image. Tensions among allies and enemies alike reached a boiling point. The threads of unity that Medusa had fought to protect were strained to their limits, as old rivalries flared and new alliances faltered. Political leaders who feared losing their grip on power worked to undermine the rebellion, spreading lies and manipulating factions. Even among the gods who had reluctantly joined the cause, the ever-present specter of betrayal loomed large. Medusa stood at the heart of this tempest, her resolve unyielding. She had prepared for battles against mortals, against gods, but this was something altogether different. The awakening of Nitharos promised not only a physical challenge, but a philosophical one. It was a test of whether the sanctuary's ideals, justice, truth, and balance, could stand against the pure chaos embodied by a god who had once thrived on discord. Her mission had grown far beyond the confines of the garden itself. It was now a fight to preserve the fragile hope of a world poised on the edge of transformation. In the quiet moments, Medusa reflected on the journey that had led her here. The garden, once merely a refuge for the downtrodden, had become the symbol of a movement, one that united mortals and divine beings in a shared vision. But even as she marveled at the strength of their alliance, she knew the real fight was only beginning. The rebellion in Alaric's kingdom might ignite the spark of change, but it was the looming presence of Nitharos that could define the future of their world. As the sanctuary buzzed with activity, plans being drawn, supplies distributed, alliances debated, Medusa watched the horizon. She saw both the light of hope and the shadow of chaos spreading across the land. With Alaric at her side and her coalition standing, though tenuously, behind her, she prepared herself for the battles to come. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was uncertain. But for Medusa, uncertainty was not a deterrent. It was an opportunity to shape fate itself. The world was on the cusp of change, and Medusa would ensure that no matter the challenges, truth and justice prevailed.